Everyone, it's 7 p.m. here in Poland, and today will be hopefully the final episode on our discussion on nominalism. So, Horse, of course. Good to see you, and Prince Christian says good afternoon, Lloyd and the Lloyd debts. I will not be a lone attendee today. Yeah, we'll see how the numbers grow. Yesterday was over 100, so that's great. Um, yeah. So before I begin, just so everyone knows, I have a few new presentations up on my coffee shop, and I'll drop the link in the chat so that everyone can see the coffee shop link. And then, of course, I am giving away this particular slideshow here, which is a new series I'm doing on Gnosticism and early Christianity, something that's really important to understand from the perspective of attacks on the Bible, right? Attacks on the early church and claims that, of course, Gnosticism comes before Christianity. It is the original Christianity and so on, which is completely and utterly false. It also looks at the claims of Dan Brown and that sort of scholarship. So yeah, this one takes all of that apart, goes through this in detail, and the first 14 slides have been made available for free to anyone. So go to the page and please download it. I'll drop my community tab here, well, community page link here. Just go there and click on the link, and you can download the first 14 slides. For members, I've given the first 30 slides, which is like the first chapter. I've made that available for free to everyone. Right, so we've got Sandro, good to see you. Lilo Main, welcome. Hope you had a good evening. Dr. Obvious, welcome. I sent you 2 emails and 2 messages via X. I'm not sure if you received my emails because I responded to your messages to me. Century Since, welcome. Dr. Jonathan Gemmell. I met Century Since in the UK last week. It was cool. Michael, welcome. Philip Webb, hello. Dragon, hello there. Yeah, so Dragon had an interesting few things to say to me last night, which was yeah. So thanks for that. That was so apparently I attack Protestants, but of course when I said true things about the Catholic Church, I was attacking the Catholic Church. This was simply making a factual statement, the very same as made by multiple popes, which is part of the magisterium's position. But I was attacked for that, and yeah, so yeah, I can't please everybody, I guess. To reset your browser, we're just biased. I better get caught up on my 1,500 emails. Okay, yeah, so get hold of me, Dr. Obvious, and we can discuss. Katie, very welcome. All right. Okay, so let us put this aside. So again, this is available here for you, right, from Da Vinci Code to Nag Hammadi. So going through Gnosticism is a huge feature. It is the original enemy of the church, and it is still an enemy of the church. We have to understand this thing. This thing has tentacles. It is everywhere. All right, so let's dive into this. So I want to finish this. I have tried to simplify some of this to make it simpler, to make the sentences shorter, but I found it really difficult to do on this case. I've got, I think, 25 slides to go. I found it really difficult because on the one hand, I don't understand all of the technical concepts. I don't understand all of the philosophical concepts. So I had to type them out so that I could refresh myself as I went. With some topics, I understand a lot of it in my head. I've memorized it to a degree. In this case, unfortunately, I struggle to simplify and summarize. You're here for the cultural rot. Yeah. So, yeah, let's yeah, we need to fight back and we need information. We need better information than our enemies. We need to be able to call them out and point out their errors, their lies, their mistakes. All right. Right. So we ended on a different slide, of course, where we talked about how nominalism corrupts science, how it is corrupting biology. It corrupts, it's already a corrupt and error-free, error-prone, philosophy, right? It's not even philosophy, it's just error. And let's talk more about this, how it, for instance, destroys mathematics, right? And we know there's a huge amount of cultural rot, as you said, Grinch, in academia. Let's have a look. Nominalism says there are no Fs, there are no As, there are no Bs, there are no Cs, there are no 3s, there are no 5s, there are no 7s. We use these ideas even though they are literally false. 3 is literally false, F is literally false. However, they are fictionally true. Really good to know. Fictionally true, but literally false. What's the difference? Well, not a lot. So there's no difference if they were literally true. However, understand this is an example of sophistry and semantics, playing word games to undermine truth. Numbers like 3 in our worldview exist independently of human minds and human language. We discover them. We do not invent them. So nominalists play semantic games to justify absurd relativism. Now, mathematical and logical truths are absolute. Morality is absolute. Goodness would be absolute. It's an absolute rule. We don't torture babies. It's not a relative rule. It's not a subjectivist rule. And therefore, these are not reliant on human conventions. We don't simply come to an agreement that we don't like rape in my country, but it's okay next door. Okay, that's a universal rule. Can I use the information you shared with Sam? Please, yeah, go ahead and use the information. I make it publicly available. So go ahead and use it all, please. So nominalism disregards the inherent intelligibility and rationality of reality, right? It rejects this as futile sophistry, right? I reject as futile sophistry, right? So logic and reason are the pathways to truth, right? They are not just social constructs, right? Now, nominalism lacks a foundation for scientific inquiry. It gets rid of the effectiveness of scientific language. If 3 is just a social construct, then maybe you have your own 3. Maybe someone has his version of 3, right? So this causes confusion among scientific paradigms because we cannot come to a universal set of agreements as to what numbers are or what letters are or what a formula says or what is universally true. Like, what is the universal formula for X? How can you come to an agreement if you cannot decide what is established? So this also ignores universal ethical principles in scientific practice, right? What if they quibble over what is honesty, what is cheating, what is malpractice? Understand? This throws everything into disarray. Thank you, JD. So this is a philosophy that is opposed to science and opposed to logic. Right? It is illogical. It is unscientific. It doesn't meet any standards of rational coherence, and this is necessary for scientific research. Nominalism also corrodes mathematics. So it puts forward that mathematical objects like numbers or sets and circles, squares, do not have existence, right? So while nominalism acknowledges concepts like a pile of 3 eggs, so you see 3 eggs, right? It acknowledges that piles of 3 eggs and the idea of the number 3 exists in your mind. They do not consider these to be the number 3. There's not an abstract concept called 3 that you are recognizing. So Platonists and nominalists agree that the number 3, if it existed, right? Remember, it's literally false. It is fictionally true, but it's the same as if it were literally true. Would be an abstract object. However, nominalists reject abstract objects and numbers, as opposed to Platonists. What about the number 19? Well, it doesn't really exist unless you're a Muslim, right? So now there are variations of this whole mathematical nominalism. They call them paraphrase nominalists, fictionalism, and something they call neo-Meinongianism. Whatever. A paraphrase nominalist we can explain by, if we say the number 4 is an even number. 4 is an even number, right? Would they object to $30 billion? I have no idea. This is nonsense. Okay, Dr. Gemmell. See you in a bit. Take care. Okay, so now interpreted at face value, they say that the object 4 has the property of being even, right? So it's a straightforward claim about an abstract object. But the problem is we invented the number 4 in our heads. We invented the rule that it is even, right? This is purely a language construct, right? So they reject the concept of evenness. They reject the concept of 4. They reject the concept of numbers. So do you understand? How can you live in a coherent world if there are no such things? So yeah, that's... Now, according to fictionalism, right? Arithmetic is a story. It's a fiction that you invent, right? It's a pretense, right? And so you pretend that there is such a thing as numbers, right? And then they say that, okay, so it's a neo-stupidity. Very good point. So fictionalists then say, look, okay, it's a pretense. It's a story. It is make-believe. It is myth. However, It is not a bad thing that mathematical sentences are not literally true. You see, because mathematics is not supposed to be literally true. You see, they explain that it is pragmatically useful, it is practical, it is intellectually interesting, despite the fact that it is not literally true. It's a fiction. You can't, these are just materialists with extra steps. And that's really what it comes down to. It's nonsense, pagan materialism with a few extra steps. So all the math tests you failed weren't true. Exactly. You passed that fiction. This is not designed to be sensible. It is designed to be deliberately destructive. It is an attack on reality. It's an attack on our worldview, on Western science. Understand? This is quite honestly what these people believe. It is insane that they do this. So fictionalism was proposed by the American philosopher Hartree Field, and I read through some of his stuff, and he makes a lot of claims like you can have mathematics and physics without numbers. And then, of course, you can find other papers that say, well, we've tried to prove this. And this is by nominalists who say, well, we've discovered different theories for how this could be true, but none of these theories agree, and we all can't make up our minds, and it's really difficult to prove, but whatever. It's fruitcake land. All right? So nominalism is anti-scientific. Let's go through some of the reasons why. The principle of universality. So science assumes that certain principles or laws, universal laws, govern the natural world, right? Nominalism denies anything that is universal. So it says that there's only particular objects. So if I take this little black thing and I drop it, so that is a physical instance, one instance where this happened. Doesn't mean it'll happen the next time. It could go sideways the next time. So there is no way we can take this specific instance and generalize. There is no way that this apple could fall in your head and you come to the idea that, oh, there's such a force as gravity, and it pulls things downwards to the center of the earth. Understand? It will then deny literally gravity, right? So this contradicts the basis of science, right? We cannot discover general rules and principles that apply to instances. They'll say, look, it just in that instance, it went downwards. Maybe it goes upwards next time. Maybe it goes sideways. Who knows? So nominalism destroys the basis of science. The problem of induction. We have to use inductive reasoning, right? We reason from general principles. Right? We reason to general principles from specific observations. The law of gravity, right? An apple supposedly falls on Newton's head, specific instance, and he from there infers a general law, gravity, right? So this means that without universal concepts or categories, we cannot draw any kind of meaningful generalizations. You cannot make categories. You cannot have any kind of certainty. Everything is random. This is very, very similar to, and it's basically paganism, where you had the gods, okay? So if you go back to Greece, you go back to ancient Greece, the gods were capricious. There were no laws, there were no rules. The gods would make up their mind. At any moment, the gods would do random things. This is what there's a word for it when what's it, not naturalism, when when God is in the world, God is part of the world, God is actually a manifestation from within the world, right? But this is a pagan philosophy. Someone can just remind me what the heck that philosophy is called. It's just pagan philosophy with scientific sounding words. So you cannot make reliable predictions, you cannot formulate scientific theories, and so it is illogical. Okay, science and language. Now we need to have language. Pantheism. Thank you very much, Dennis. I don't know why my brain just stopped there. So yes, that is pantheism. Understand, it is pagan pantheism with extra steps. It is materialism with extra steps. It is just absolute nonsense with scientific steps added. It's baffling you with BS. That's all it is. So language plays a role in scientific discourse. We need to have terms that we all have clear meanings, right? We understand what these things are. So if these things don't refer to any universal realities, right, then you can't have science. You can't have a word that means something. Weight, gravity, size, length, width, mass. All these words mean nothing. So you cannot calculate anything. You cannot rely on anything. Everything is just capricious. That again, pagan Greece. We're back to the gods. We're back to pagan belief in gods. That's all it is. Right? So we have to use precise and consistent language to make sense of the world. And of course, this then obviously is a way to destroy a rational, consistent world. Now, if general terms have no real reference, if they don't correlate to anything in the world, scientific language loses all ability to refer to real things and to communicate. That means anyone can make up their own science. So scientific discourse just dies. Scientific concepts, theories, and laws must be communicable and universally understood, right? So now this term incommensurability of scientific paradigms, right? Now we have scientific paradigm shifts. One idea supplants another, right? The idea that we stood on the backs of turtles, which are standing on the backs of an elephant, that idea was supplanted by, I don't know, the earth is a body rotating through space or whatever the case might be, right? And gravity, right? So you cannot compare or evaluate different scientific paradigms meaningfully, right? So this notion of paradigm shift says that when paradigms differ, right, the entities they discuss are all understandable, and you can compare one idea with another because you can look at differences. Discord, yes, exactly. However, with nominalism, there's no such universal. So any idea is as good as any other idea. It is relativism. It is merely a way to clothe pagan ideas, relativism, subjectivism, in confusing gobbledygook. It is the ultimate expression of sophistry. So let's see. Ethical implications. So beyond epistemological and logical concerns, right? Nominalism's rejection of universals has ethical implications. So we have to have things guided by universal ethical principles. We must have truthfulness, right? Integrity, respect, right? However, nominalism rejects universals. So truthfulness, that's an abstract. They reject those things. So therefore, my truth, your truth, his truth, 1 + 1 is equal to 3 for me. So my maths answer is right. So you understand, this means it undermines ethical foundations of science. You cannot have a commitment to truth. You cannot even define what truth is. Understand the corrosive nature of this. It depends on the context. Okay? Well, man, it depends on the context. So nominalism believes that different scientific theories or paradigms do not share a common basis for comparison. Neither does ethics, morality share a basis for comparison. You see, like I said, rape might be illegal in your country, but when you cross the border, it's perfectly, legal on the other side. Illegal for you, legal for them, because it depends on the context. You see, there's a context involved. Like murder might be not good in your country, but on the other side of the border, there could be a context. It could be that you're a tourist and you had money and they were hungry and they killed you to take your money, and there's a context for it, and it's okay because do you understand it was normal back then? Muslims, exactly. Do you understand that nominalistic influence within Islam? It's a way to weasel out of responsibility. It's a way to undermine objective truth. So, see, these paradigms, these rules, these truths are different. They cannot be measured against each other. It all depend. Common core is the cognitive fragmentation of developing brains of children. Yeah, it's destruction of the human mind, okay? So nominalists argue that the criteria for what is true or rational depend on the specific assumptions and the concepts of each paradigm. Because why? Everyone is right. My truth is as good as your truth. My 1 + 1 is equal to 7 is as good as 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And who am I to say different? Understand? This is what we end up with, right? So we can't understand each other because there's no truth. There are just no standard rules, right? And so, of course, understand how corrosive and destructive this is. So if there are as an example, if there are two scientific paradigms, right, explaining the behavior of light, one as a particle, paradigm A, and the other as a wave, paradigm B. Each paradigm operates with its own unique set of assumptions, its own set of concepts, its own standards for establishing truth. There are no common, shared, universal measurement systems. There's no common mathematics. There is no common standard of rules. There's no common understanding of what is fair, what is correct, what is an orthodox method of measurement. All of these don't exist. So if the paradigms are grounded in completely different premises, there is no neutral criterion to definitively evaluate any paradigm over another. So how do you know which is better? Well, I read the Bible, and the Bible says this, and that's. And what's my authority? Well, I read the Bible, and that's what I believe. And then the other guy, well, you're wrong because I read the Bible, and that's what I believe, and you're wrong for these reasons. And no, but you're wrong because, understand, this applies to religion as much as it does to science. There is no authority. There is nothing that is held up as a standard. So, a few conclusions about this as we wind down. Last 10 slides or so. Nominalism 16 slides here. Nominalism is the philosophy that denies the existence of universals and abstract objects. Akra, welcome. ORATEX, welcome. So, right. It believes only in the existence of particular objects or particular events, right? Discrete individual events. There's a dog and a dog and a dog, but there's no such thing as dogs. There's a tree or something that you verbally identify as a tree. There's another thing you verbally identify as a tree, but there's no such thing as tree. There are trees, physical trees in the world, but are those really trees? Maybe they're bananas. Maybe you gave those bananas the name trees by using language to describe them as trees when they're actually just bananas, right? Maybe these are both trees as well. Who knows, right? Because it's just a social construct, it's a language construct. So words and names are just constructs, and they do not link to any universal reality, nothing objective. So realism, that's what we believe, says universals have an objective reality independent of human thought. It is schizophrenic materialism. Yeah, it is. It's insane. It's nuts. So the argument is that nominalism, by denying essences and objective universals, helped contribute to the rise of concepts like gender is a social construct. Maths is a social construct. Words are a social construct. Letters are a social construct. See, I just made up my own alphabet. You see, it's a social construct. I just made up my own alphabet. And who are you to tell me I'm wrong? Do you understand? It's that crazy. Gender is a social construct. So this underlies the modern transgender movement. So the thinking goes, 1, if nominalism is true, there are no objective essences. There are no men, there are no women, there are no dogs. There's no universals or categories in reality. So everything that exists are just individual instances of something, okay? Discrete objects, discrete entities. Categories like man and woman do not correspond to any reality. They are human constructs and names. They're just names that we made up to apply to random things. Just a collection of things. Instead of a banana tree. Yeah, maybe the banana. Yeah, maybe all trees are a banana tree. You see, they'll be able to come up with some random nonsense sophist excuse, right? This is dangerous. It will lead to nihilism. It does lead to nihilism. The whole point is to lead to nihilism. It is destructive. This is inimical to life. This falls under modernism. This goes into my discussion on Pius X. This is one of the major philosophies. I had to break it out separately. This is one of the major philosophies that Pius X wrote about as the threats to the church in what he called the synthesis of all heresies, right? Modernism. And this was one of the major components. This nominalism. It's a massive threat. And don't forget, Martin Luther is the first Protestant, no matter how much people deny it. He is the founder of the Protestant religion. He was a nominalist. He was as messed up in the head as what I'm showing here. This man loved this stuff. So nothing exists which also doesn't exist. And there you're back to the pagan Greeks. You're literally right back to the pagan Greeks. Okay? So yeah, hello Lloyd from Montenegro. Hello there. Loved your talk with Thunders. Thank you. My cousins are Indian and grew up in England, and what he said was spot on. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow the conversation because I'm also trying to read the comments and do other things, so I can't always follow everything the guest is saying. So we can throw away the physics and the chemist's handbook. Yes, horse. That's exactly. That they can define the rules as they go, right? So their rules are as good as your rules. So there's no rules. Nominalism says that gender is not based on an objective essence. It's a social construct. It's a language construct. No characteristics like biological sex, genetics, anything like that. Winkies and not having a winky defines what it means to be a man or a woman. So then you get gender exists on a spectrum. Gender is how you identify, because they've got to come up with random, stupid ideas to explain away the difficulties, the logical difficulties they create for themselves. Right? They've got to try and explain how all this works, and they have to make these frantic theories because they won't simply deal with reality. Right? They believe that you can identify as a gender. So your gender becomes what you choose to call yourself. And words have no meaning. Words can change meaning at any time, except their words have very detailed and very precise meaning. It's just not your meaning. It is the opposite of anything that you define. They are messing with you. As you would say, they are fucking with you. It's that simple. In this way, nominalism and the denial of essences logically leads to, and it reinforces the ideological foundation of the transgender movement. Because someone asked me, I got into this because someone actually asked me, where does this whole transgender thing come from? And this is part of the nominalist philosophy. This allows for it. Nihilism equals atheism, but they don't want to admit it. Of course, atheists, yeah. I mean, atheism is one of the dumbest philosophies to ever be created. It's also, in the last 250 years, the most bloodthirsty, genocidal, and dangerous idea. Female is female, but woman is not necessarily a female, therefore male can be a woman, basis of gender ideology. Brain rot. Exactly, Mr. Rock. Since Europe has abandoned Christ, I feel like God has given them over to a reprobate government, therefore explaining, yeah. So, well, we are those grains of sand, right? 1, 2, 3 grains of sand, and you start to grind those gears. And a whole lot of grains of sand, you can jam those gears to a halt, right? Why waste the energy creating unreality? It's crazy. I know. It's possession. It's possession by an idea, by a false ideology. You're a social construct. You're a social construct, but not me. I was born in the wrong body, so you have to let me change my body. I know, none of it makes sense. So nominalism is an ideological enabler. Gender becomes a matter of naming and human choice, not reality. So, however, nominalism alone does not explain or cause the rise of the transgender movement. There are multiple factors. Social constructionism, right? Categories and concepts we take for granted are social constructs rather than objective facts. This includes gender roles and gender expressions, right? This complements nominalism, right? And also allows for the idea of gender as fluid and non-binary. 2, postmodernism. It emphasizes relativity and subjectivity, right? This rejects absolute or objective truth, which contributes to the idea that categories like male, female, masculine, feminine have no absolute definitions. Now, of course, they'll say there are no absolutes, right? There are no absolutes and things are fluid, but you are definitely, absolutely, positively wrong. You see, so they're just messing with you. They firmly believe in their nonsense, in their absolutes. And much of the time, they're simply lying to you when they claim to be confused or when they claim that things are fluid. No. You're just wrong. They're simply gaslighting you. This is gaslighting to the nth degree. Understand, right? Ever since Christians in the West have declined, crime rates have gone up. Well, since a lot of Muslims came in and third worlders, I mean, I come from the third world. Believe me, I know what my people think like. I know exactly what they're like. I don't want to be anywhere near them if I can help it. Why do you think I moved to a nice, safe, white country? Because I know what Africans are like. They're not going to fool me. I grew up there. Right, so, okay, so there's no absolute definitions, and everything is choice and interpretation, my interpretation, see? Now, queer theory. Queer theory comes out of communism. It's Marxism with wearing a wig and lipstick. So an interdisciplinary approach to sexuality and gender that rejects traditional categories. It destabilizes notions of fixed sexual categories, right? Queer theory shapes modern concepts of gender fluidity and non-binary identity. James, what's the good grief? Conceptual James. Yeah, just look up Conceptual James. Newdiscourses.com. You need to look up the New Discourses on YouTube as well. James, what is his name? My memory is horrible today. But you need to look up Conceptual James. His discussions on these topics are fantastic. She says, don't think anyone can pull the wool over your eyes, Lloyd. Thank you. James Lindsay. Yes, James Lindsay. Thank you very much. I always struggle to remember his surname. So James Lindsay, you need to watch James Lindsay's talks on this. Look at the negation of the real as an example. His talk, Negation of the Real. It is fantastic. That really describes a lot of these things in detail. Intersectionality, right? The interconnected notion of social categories like gender, race, class, sexual orientation, right? And this leads to a gender identity being influenced by multiple factors, right? So the color of your skin gives you brownie points and, gives you, you know how it works. You've seen it all before. Okay, so gender becomes complex and multidimensional, right? I mean, if I was a dwarf, like a dwarf with one leg and half blind and half deaf, they'd probably make me president of the United States, right? So LGBT advocacy, right? They wanted acceptance and rights of those with non-traditional sexual orientations. Notice, though, that all of these things are anti-biblical. They're anti the Christian ethos. Understand, it's not an accident that this is what they are. The victimhood scale. Exactly, horse. This is the height of self-centered narcissism. Yes, it is narcissistic to the core. It is everything that is negative. It is narcissistic. It is gaslighting. My sexuality is my experience, yeah. Okay, so advocacy, all this advocacy by these groups shapes the culture, shapes the ideas. And the last one, youth culture and social contagion. right? The whole spread of the LGBT movement, and that is social contagion. It's all about the self. In other words, it is satanic, right? It is worship of the self. You become God. You become an idol. It is all satanic. It breaks the Ten Commandments. So this idea of youth culture, the social contagion, spreads on college campuses, right? And those college campuses starts in schools. It's now in kindergartens, and eventually those people graduate and go into government. They go into the law enforcement. They go into judiciary, and they are now the people in charge. These insane blue-haired people are the ones in charge, right? So younger generations embrace all of this gender fluid nonsense, and they reject the categories that have become established. Sorry to see that, Catherine M. Sorry to hear that. So politics is downstream from culture. We always hear that. Politics is downstream from culture. Remember, culture is downstream from religion. What is the religion that is feeding this? Well, Satanism, right? Ultimately. So politics. So new concepts of gender are linked to progressive political ideology. Anything that moves away from Christianity, basically. Politics shapes culture. Political groups, they spread topics like gender identity, and these philosophical and ideological positions are subjective, they're relativistic, but notice how they claim to be correct. If they're relativistic, that means they just made them up for themselves, but they claim to be correct and you are wrong. But understand, it is gaslighting, it is bullying, right? So there's no logical consistency, and they are antithetical to Western and Christian thought. Radical postmodernism. So this is the view that there are no objective truths or meanings at all, only culturally constructed narratives and myths. So where I come from in Africa, theft is normal, so they won't mind if I steal a lot of money from them. If I beat them up, knock them down, take their wallet, they'll be good with that because that's normal in my culture. It's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong, right? So this denies, of course, the Logos and the higher truth that Christians advocate. Right? If everything is relative, no one is wrong. So there's no theft, right? Because it's not theft in my culture. It's just me helping to feed myself and my family, look after my family better. Moral relativism. Moral truths are relative to cultures. This is Darwinian as well. I've discussed this in the Darwin series. This becomes ultimately might makes right. That's all it is, right? The law of the jungle. So this, again, contradicts Christian concepts of moral law and objective good and evil. Again, it is antithetical to Christianity, not by accident, by design, right? Queer theory, gender theory. So concepts of radically fluid identity and all of these categories violates logical consistency from a Christian perspective. Gnosticism. Ancient mystical philosophies that emphasize spiritual enlightenment over logic, right? Subjective experience, right? Will over logos, right? Esoteric secret knowledge rather than objective truth, right? Early church fathers, all of them argued against these Gnostic philosophies. And then you have paganism and neo-paganism, these belief systems that embrace myth, symbolism, and ritual over logical reasoning, right? So polytheistic pagan faiths contradict Christian monotheism and notions of absolute theological truth. So you can see this is very much arrayed against Christianity. And there's a reason why they're all arrayed against Christianity, right? Secular humanism is another problem, right? I've discussed that in my series on schmuckular humanism on my channel at length. It's a religion derived from Christianity, but an inversion and a corruption of Christianity, right? It rejects the Christian God, moral law, and higher meaning. Notice, though, that in theory, on paper, these are all different concepts. These are all different religions. These are all different ideologies, different philosophies. Notice, however, the overlap, the consistency, and they're all very much against the Christian idea of the Logos, right? So logically contradictory, this whole idea of secular humanism is based on pagan rationalism and materialism. Yeah, if it benefits me and my group, it's good. That's Darwin. It's also Islam, right? It's crazy how every single anti-Christian worldview intertwines, and that is true, Mr. Rock. That is very, very true, yes. So from a Christian perspective, we advocate for logos, right? Truth, reason, and logic. And these ideas are all subjective, relativistic, they're mystical systems, they're antithetical, right? So I'll continue. I think I've made the point here. So these concepts arise from philosophical postmodernism, social constructionism, queer theory, and other narratives. They don't arise from a logical reasoning process. And you cannot win a fight. You cannot logic and reason someone out of a position he was not logicked and reasoned into. Sometimes you just have to defeat your enemies. You just have to destroy your enemies. You're not going to come to a rational accommodation with them. It's all satanic, yeah. So intent. So the intent behind concepts like all this gender fluidity and blah blah is a desire to supposedly, like the Gnostics, to liberate you from perceived social constraints, to liberate you from matter and bring you into the realm of thought, of spirit. It is Gnostic, right? It wants to empower people to determine and express their identity in new ways. It is Gnostic, right? The intent is ideological and it destabilizes traditional categories. So this freedom of theirs undermines and destroys culture and society. So the moral and social order is ultimately destroyed. It's all the same origin. These all anti-Christian ideas were the same origin, and you can see how it converges. Freedom or freedom. So what's the purpose is? They want greater freedom, right? They want greater inclusiveness. They want validation of my sexuality, doll. I want to be validated because I'm actually a pansexual, gender fluid, and I'm like a unicorn person, and I'm like semi-pantheistic, and I identify as semi-Martian. Okay, so yeah, they want validation, right? And by defining their own rules, they can validate themselves in opposition to already set standards. So critics see the purpose as promoting relativism over objectivism, right? Subjectivity over reason and cultural narratives over logical truth. My personal feelings and my truths overcome all universals because look, I'm awesome and I'm just awesome, doll, and I'm telling you, it's like I don't need those rules. I'm breaking the rules here. Look at me. I'm special. That's all it is, right? So yeah, these are all inconsistent, contradictory ideas, right? So while this is all disguised as a well-intentioned effort to empower and include supposedly marginalized, don't pick on the marginalized people, okay? Don't pick on them because they're marginalized, and you must be nice and tolerate them and let them bend you over a barrel, right? So basically, it's just a game they're playing, okay? It's disguised as a well-intentioned effort to empower people and to help the marginalized. It's really just a way to bend you over a barrel and do you from behind without Vaseline. It's that simple, okay? Don't fall for it. Don't fall. Now, these people may not realize they're doing so, but they are doing so regardless. It is toxic and destructive regardless. They're zombies. They don't know any better. They know not what they do, but they will destroy your world. You still have to fight them. You have to neutralize them somehow, right? Be it by voting, be it by passing laws, be it by just saying no to this nonsense. Okay, so social categories, okay, and moral orders emerge as solutions to persistent societal problems, right? Like marriage, right? Look at the black community, right? You got like 99% unmarried kids, okay? And then 80% of them go to jail, right? So marriage is a way to stabilize society. Now they're destroying these things. Once you destroy the traditions, the problems come back. So these are not arbitrary rules, right? These rules enable stability and cooperation and values that have practical social benefits. These things destroy all of that. This is socially destructive. So trans people are oppressed, lost. Trans people are really just becoming what we would call mass shooters. Okay? That they're really just people who go around shooting places up. That's what trans are doing lately. There's a lot of that going on. This just happened yesterday again. So yeah, trans have a whole month dedicated to them. Exactly. Right. So right, okay, these are also radical philosophies. They want to deconstruct all social categories. Read Burn It All to the Ground, and then supposedly somehow this phoenix will rise from the ashes. No, it'll just be burned down and we'll be back in the Stone Age, right? So they want to burn all these things down as mere social constructs, right? And they, of course, because these are just social or language constructs, they, of course, do not see their practical utility and purpose, right? They throw the baby out with the bathwater. So they introduce the same problems. They reintroduce, they bring back the old problems. And assume this is the intention. Assume this is enemy action, right? So either the old problems return or new problems come back. These are corrosive. They are not cohesive, right? They use language to manipulate, not to communicate. These are anti-life, antithetical. Why do you think they're so heavily into abortion? And, right, strict gender roles and the nuclear family emerged to solve issues like uncertainties in paternity, control of sexuality, promotion of child rearing, and such. Okay, rejecting these norms, have reintroduced uncertainties, and now you get the gang phenomenon because that's where people belong, right? Destroy and rebuild, solve et coagula. Yes, Masons, yeah. Masons have been so destructive. Masons have been satanic, I mean, quite bluntly. So, radical individualism, narcissism, right, an emphasis on subjective identity over shared social norms has led to social fragmentation, not cooperation. So, these ideas are divisive, they're not unifying, right? Social trust is destroyed. Moral relativism lacks values that bind and enable a functioning social order, right? So, philosophies that deconstruct social categories and norms fail to understand their sociological and pragmatic functions, and you end up with chaos. Okay, it is not about empowerment, it is not about enabling, it is not about protecting the marginalized, it is about destroying, it is about giving them cover so that they can continue like parasites to eat away, like termites, to eat away at the foundations of your house, at the pillars of your house. They are enemies. You have to view them in that sense. Ideologically, they certainly are enemies, whether they know it or not, but they must be stopped. So now, what's his face? There was this guy, Kevin Non-Tradcath. 6 more slides to go. So there was this guy, Kevin Non-Tradcath, that came on, and he actually emailed me. I have a serious question. I mean, should I actually go on these people's shows and talk to them? Because, I mean, I don't know. I just think I can use my time better. I prefer to simply do what I do because they spend all of their time talking the bullshit that they do. So, you know, I don't necessarily specifically go around attacking people. I do my thing and other people don't like it, but that's fine. But since he came on my channel and said things, blah, 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 I'm responding to those comments. But he said, we only reject abstracts, not universals. So I added some slides to try to make sense of that idea based on the philosophy that he's espousing, right? So nominalism rejects abstracts. Universals are a form of abstracts, right? So, and so now suddenly he's invented his own type, right? He's not a Catholic. He's now a non-denominational, but he's an evangelical, pineapple-y non-denominational, whereas the other guy is an evangelical, non-evangelical, half-liquid, semi-pantheistic, cup-like evangelical, something. Understand? It's just making up random definitions. Well, I'm a decaf guy. This is a full calf guy, and I'm a half calf. I'm half caffeinated. I'm not a decaffeinated guy. I'm not a calf. I'm a half caffeinated. It's just making things up. It's just making up your own categories. Yeah, it's not productive. So look, you need to win. This is not a fight you can afford to lose. We have been losing. You need to understand. Now you know the basis of these ideas. You know the source of these ideas. Once you know the source, once you understand it, you can now intelligently discuss it. And you need to destroy this. Right? So, okay. So precision of definitions is critical in philosophy, right? And communication. We must, to ensure a shared understanding. So constant, private, personal redefinitions is self-serving subjectivism, okay? It is merely self-serving for you. And this, of course, removes the idea of consensus, of a standard. So if these people were redefining squares as round, we'd know they're either dishonest or they are seriously low IQ. The fact that he's redefining nominalism to his personal version means that's fine for him, but there's another 8 billion people on the planet who don't care, okay? So that's fine for you, go play in the corner. Yeah, doesn't matter, right? So this would bring chaos. If we all defined pineapple, I mean, if this to me was a pineapple and this to you was a pineapple, and then this to you was a pineapple, if I said, please go bring me a pineapple, if I said to my wife, bring me a newspaper, if I said, bring me a pineapple, and she came and, I don't know, threw a piano at me, because that's her interpretation of bring me a pineapple, we'd have a problem. Understand? If we cannot communicate common terms, if we don't have standards, if there's no consensus on the meaning of words, it would be a serious problem, right? I like pie. So I like pie means throw this metal cup at me. Do you understand? You can't make things up willy-nilly. Just no, right? A leftist I know was trying to be an apologist for Marxism by adding adjectives for various types of Marxists. Yeah, like democratic Marxism. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yes, Janice, for sure. So moving on. Now, remember, if they were redefining squares or redefining circles, right, we'd know they're full of poop, right? If your wife throws a piano at you, be sure to duck and find out who what you did. Yeah, so he either knowingly or unknowingly tries to be a foot in the door, just take a half step down the slippery slope. Yeah. So anyway, so words and concepts have established standard meanings, or we would have relativism and chaos and subjectivism. Right. So redefining arbitrarily to avoid logical flaws is dishonest. Right. That is not a standard definition. That is not a universally adopted definition. That is a private definition. So he's being a nominalist by having a single particular instance that applies just to him, right? So he's denying the universal application of the idea of nominalism. So it means that the term nominalism can mean anything you want it to mean, just like Protestantism can mean anything you want it to mean, right? Because you made it up. So definitions matter. Now, universals cannot exist in a non-abstract form. They are not things, right? They're not things, right? So again, thank you to my subscribers for all of your support. I have a really nice mouse. My last mouse broke. I'd had it for 10 years, 8 to 10 years. Was the version 2 of this one, and I got this one, the 3, a couple of months ago. It's fantastic. So thank you. Because of you, I can buy these quality items. So anyway, Abstractor referred to abstract objects. He said we reject Abstractor, right? He accepts universals, but he denies Abstractor, except universals are abstracts. So Abstractor refers to abstract objects like numbers, concepts, properties, letters, right? And these things lack physical existence. This exists in space. These things lack spatio-temporal, exist in time and space, right? They're objects in thought. Right? So they are real objects that we say exist in thought. Now, denying Abstractor as he did makes it very hard to explain universals, because universals are abstracts. And he believes in universals, but he denies abstracts. So show me a concept. You can't, because it doesn't exist in the real world like this does. It doesn't exist. It's a concept. It's an abstract. So, okay. So how do you explain universals? How do you explain numbers? How do you explain morality? Right? And propositional attitudes. I believe, I doubt. Okay? I think, I hope, I perceive. These propositional attitudes are just, again, a concept. So understand that these are universals. And sorry, these are abstracts, and he denies abstracts. It makes no sense. Now, these are all truths that are independent of physical instances. They're not a physical instance of something. They're not just matter extending into space, as materialists believe. So the whole idea is incoherent at the outset. Now, nominalists say that only particulars exist, not the abstract categories they belong to. There's a dog and a dog and a dog, or a thing that we have called a dog, or something we've randomly called a dog, but there's no concept called dog. There's no concept called animals. There's no concept called mammals. There's nothing called women, right? So abstract objects like numbers, propositions, universals, these things are needed to make sense, to categorize, to sort, to identify and make permanent, right, our sense of the world. And without them, we will lose mathematics, we'll lose logic, we will lose morality, we lose language. This is a really toxic, destructive ideology. So everything is a concept, Akra, correct. Francis Boole, I have to rewatch it, but this looks great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sorry I didn't meet you in the UK. I had to go, but I was not in London, though. So yeah. DMH Music, welcome, thank you. SC, a better late than never, very welcome. Anyone I missed? Adrian Ionescu, redefining is like telling, did God really said that, Eve? Yeah, exactly, redefining, exactly. That's a very good point. All right, so now, Abstractor are necessary for thought and reality. Denying Abstractor is logically problematic because abstracts are central to reasoning, to knowledge, to truth. So his whole point doesn't make sense. So now I made a few slides. This would have been finished, but I had to make a few extra slides just to deal with the implications of his statements that he made in the chat. The devolution of Starbucks in the film Idiocracy is a good example of this. Yeah, so is this all making sense so far? I found it really difficult to summarize all of this too much. I needed to keep these pointers going to help me, and I know I repeat certain points, but yeah, it's just that this idea is everywhere. It's pervasive. So I want to show this from different perspectives to show how it affects everything, how it has infected all of the concepts we work with, all of the science, mathematics, language, poetry, school, education, justice. It's everywhere. Not a single child graduated 8th grade in 2023 with the minimum of reading comprehension, math, or science, according to... Yeah, it's crazy. It's insane. I mean, I've seen reports like a whole school district and not one child would pass reading. Like, it's just like insane, right? So yeah. So thank you, Dragon. So yeah, this all makes sense. I hope it's not arbitrary. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense of a lot of the problems we see in the world today. So mathematics. So nominalism undermines everything. So last 4 or 5 slides. Abstract objects like numbers and mathematical concepts are foundational, of course, to mathematics, right? So without them, mathematical operations and theories would not be possible. Thank you, White Rose. So we need abstracts. So he denies abstracts. He accepts universals, but numbers are abstract. So how do you do maths? Well, that's why that other fool that I mentioned, the guy that developed the whole fictional mathematics, right? It makes sense, but no sense. Yeah, exactly. It's senseless, but it's... Yeah. So he wrote this whole thing about physics. I think he wrote a paper. I was reading some of it, and it just was like, it was mashing my brain. It was it was physics without maths, or physics without numbers, or some nonsense like that. And it was just, you're like, how, why? It's like swimming without water. You know, it's like, why? Now, logic. Abstract objects like logical principles and relationships are essential for reasoning and logical deduction. Okay? These abstracts are the basis for constructing valid arguments and making logical inferences. So you need abstract concepts for logic. And he says, no, they don't exist. Morality. Abstract objects like ethical principles and values are the basis of moral reasoning and decision-making. They provide guidance for distinguishing between right and wrong, and they shape moral frameworks and ethical systems. There's actually a fantastic, I'm not sure if it's Aquinas or Aristotle or a different philosopher. I believe it's probably Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas. He speaks of the existence of certain things which we can tell by their absence. Like he says, when someone mistreats you, you have a sense of unfairness. So we know that fairness is an abstract universal that exists because we notice it when we are treated unfairly. We can feel it. We wouldn't hunger for it. We wouldn't want fairness if such a thing did not exist as an abstract in the world. We just as we know that food is a requirement, we must eat because we get hungry. With the lack of food, we get lonely without the lack of companionship. We get hurt. We feel hurt without the lack of fairness. So these concepts exist, and we know them from when they are absent. So understand. So this was a really good philosophy. I discussed it in one of my previous talks. I think in Theological, I discussed it there. Right? What a bunch of garbage. That's just an exercise in public lewdness. Look at me, I'm so smart. Yeah. So I feel sorry for all the dogs and cats they try to make vegetarians. I know. It's insane. Vegetarian. If your cat is a vegetarian, it's not the cat that thinks so. Right? If your 3-year-old kid is transgender, it's definitely not the kid. Right? So let me see. Okay, so let's continue. Language. Abstract objects are crucial in language. They give us meaning and reference for words and symbols, right? Abstract concepts and ideas allow communication and the expression of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. So a universal refers to a general concept or category that can apply to multiple particular instances. An abstract refers to objects or entities that do not exist in time or space, but they have a form of existence through their ability to be objects of thought. So an abstract is an object of thought that doesn't exist in space. A universal is a concept or category that can apply to multiple instances. Anything that falls downwards, right? That's gravity. It's universal, right? So, right. Now, universals are not a specific concept or a category, while abstracts are non-physical entities or ideas, right? If the cat is vegetarian, it is dead. Yes. I knew a music producer who made his dog into a vegetarian. Poor little guy. Yeah, I know. So now they are forcing reinterpretation to suit an ideological and political agenda. So Christian theology without Abstractor. What happens? He claims to be a Christian. I think he's talking poop. But what is the end result of Christian theology without Abstractor? Now, this is critical for understanding the last 4 slides. This is critical for understanding, again, the impact on Christian doctrine, on what happens to the church, on religion, on to the Bible, right? This would force the redefinition of key concepts. God is universal. God is an abstract. So if you're denying these, then God has to be redefined, right? The Trinity is an abstract. It needs to be redefined, right? The soul is an abstract. It needs to be redefined. Goodness and sin, right? These are universals and abstracts. These are abstracts. They're not physical entities. They all need to be redefined. This allows you to redefine everything. So key Christian theological concepts like God, the Trinity, the soul, and moral values all appeal to abstractor. If abstractor are denied, these concepts must be reinterpreted in a way that denies their abstract nature. That's how come William of Ockham threw away his concept of the Trinity. He opened the door to other philosophers to follow and to come up with their own random heretical ideas of the Trinity. That's why he said the Trinity makes no sense. That's why either you have 3 gods, or you have to say it's actually just one God. Then you get this Islamic monotheism, or you get Gnostic monotheism with the monad called Albert, or you get tritheism, which is a heresy, 3 separate gods. Understand? This is where we come to. So this would require redefining or reinterpreting these concepts in a purely individualistic, personal, and subjective terms. Then it becomes not something that you accept, but something that you create for yourself, entirely subjective. So some schools of thought rely more on metaphorical or symbolic, right, subjective interpretations of these concepts. And exactly this thing happened in the Reformation, right? Certain people had their own metaphorical or symbolic, subjective, relativistic interpretations of God, of the Trinity. And this is exactly what happened. This idea, this whole moral relativism, this entire nominalistic concept was one of the major underpinnings of Martin Luther, of Calvin, of Zwingli, and this bled its way right into culture, right into Christianity. So arguments for God's existence and nature, all of them use abstract concepts like God's omniscience, God's omnipotence, God's perfection, right? God is understood as transcendent, as universal, and existing independently of individual perspectives or opinions. But then, with this framework of theirs, God becomes subjective, right? God entirely becomes subjective. That's why Mr. Kevin non-trad Cath would then have an entirely subjective view of God. And if he doesn't, if he follows the traditional Catholic view, then he's inconsistent because he picks and chooses then. Right? Then it's a pick and choose idea. You don't know what he's going to pick and choose next time. So the implications depend on how consistent they are about denying the abstracts and how flexibly religious concepts can be reinterpreted. But there are some things that are not open to flexibility. They are the truth. And 1 + 1 is equal to 2. There is no flexibility. It is absolute. There is no discussion about it, right? Men are men, women are women. Men have winkies, women don't. These are not open to discussion, but of course, they will then redefine all of this. If he's a Catholic, he's a cafeteria Catholic. Yeah, he's a false bad Catholic. So, understand. So, now the extent of reforms needed depends on how one interprets the denial of abstractor, right? And denying abstractor forces Christian theology to require significant redesign, right? In your head, you have to reconceptualize and recontextualize all the key concepts, all the arguments. And exactly this happened during the Reformation. So to deny abstractor is to deny God. God is an abstract concept. He's not a physical concept, right? God is not a physical thing like this is. God is being. God is something else beyond physicality, right? So therefore, if you deny that abstracts exist, you deny God. So he is the ultimate abstract entity, right? So Christians have to oppose any philosophy like nominalism that denies the existence of abstract entities and universals. These concepts are central to Christian theology. So therefore, he is denying concepts that are central to Christian theology, and he's inconsistent or he's incoherent and he doesn't know it. So God is immaterial. God is transcendent. God is not a concrete particular. God is not a particular, just one of many. God is not just a thing, right? He's not part of the pantheistic whole. He's not a thing in the world. He is the creator of the world, right? So denying abstractor undermines the Christian idea of God. The Trinity refers to the unity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They share the same divine essence or divine nature. Nominalism denies essences, it denies universals, it denies abstracts. The soul is an immaterial mind or spirit. It is not a physical thing. Nominalism denies the existence of immaterial entities. So by definition, you're denying the Trinity, you're denying the soul, you're denying God. Moral values like goodness, justice, and righteousness are abstract ideals. They are not concrete particulars. They are not individual manifestations of a thing. So, nominalism cannot ground objective moral truths and ethics, nor is it the basis for Christianity. It creates heresy. And Martin Luther, I'll be blunt, Martin Luther is the first Protestant. He was a heretic. So the afterlife, heaven and hell, point to immaterial realms, not physical places. So nominalism cannot account for life after death, not without a lot of verbal gobbledygook. Nominalism and the denial of Abstractor severely damages and corrodes Christian theology. It denies anything that is immaterial or transcendent, so it denies God at the end of the day. So God's attributes like omniscience, omnipotence, and perfection have no meaning if there are no abstract concepts or abstract properties. Nominalism recognizes only concrete particulars. So there's no such thing as goodness. There's no such concept of a universal concept of good deeds. I did a thing, and that thing we happen to call good, right? I didn't rape someone today, whereas the other guy, he raped someone, but that's just because in that country they call that bad, but it could be good. So do you understand the problem that this causes? So last couple of slides. So they destroy the nature of God. Traditional attributes of God like omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence are abstract concepts. Nominalism forces a revision of these attributes, right? You have to now focus on God's actions, right? So now you're going to focus on God's activities, God's actions. And what did Calvin do, right? Calvin focuses on oh good grief, what is Calvin? Oh God, now I've forgotten what Calvin means to say, but he always focuses on the power of God, right? So this is exactly where Calvin went, right? This is where Luther went, right? Calvin, obviously, the way he discusses it becomes a central tenet of his idea of theology. So that is a nominalist idea that is now redefining his concept of God. That's why you're focusing on God's actions, okay? And they focus on God's historical revelations as opposed to God's abstract nature, because then you have to look at things that happened rather than this abstract idea, which does not exist. So yes, it leads straight to individual subjectivism. The doctrine of the Trinity is an abstract idea, right? So nominalists would have to tell you that this doesn't exist, right? So the soul is conceived of as an abstract immaterial essence, right? Denying it means you have to reconsider what it means to be human. And by default, you're going to shift towards being a materialist. Right. This leads us to atheism. So when I did the discussion with Pius X and his discussion of how nominalism and all of these whole modernism all lead to nihilism and atheism and materialism, that's exactly what he's talking about. Does Paleo-Hebrew fit into abstract concepts? I have no idea what that even means, Steve Henry. I'm not even sure that's even relevant, right? So Hebrew, it's a language. Language is an abstract concept. So they know actions are part of salvation. To deny the importance of human actions, they need to shift the focus to God's actions alone. Exactly. What did Calvin call it? Calvin calls it the not the majesty, but there's a word they have. Good grief. Where God makes divine decrees, it's all about God's ability to decree and say, right? To give orders, to give commands. It's all about that. I'm not talking about divine command theory, but there's a word for that. Okay, so God is the grounding for moral absolutes and objective truth. But if God doesn't exist in the way that we believe because of these nominalists, then of course, then God cannot be, not God's will. No, it's a term that they use. So nominalism can only recognize particular moral rules and beliefs based on subjective individual perspectives, cultural norms. This is Darwinism. This is atheism. That's why I've mentioned in the past that when you look at William of Ockham, his ideas are in line with modern atheism. They're not Christian. They're not remotely Catholic, right? So yeah. So understand, there is no abstract moral ideal. So if you look at these ideas, these are atheistic. These are entirely atheistic. These are not Christian ideas. remotely speaking. Okay, so a nominalist can tell you that the rule "do not steal" exists because society has collectively agreed that theft is harmful. However, the moral rule is not universal. It has no abstract basis beyond the shared understanding of that particular group. So theft could be just fine in the town next door and not okay in your little village, but you need to just accept it. Why do you think they are not prosecuting all of these migrants that come in and cause major crime and theft? Because they're operating on a nominalistic view. Because for these people, this minority that is oppressed, it's okay for them to steal. Do you understand? You're seeing the manifestation in the world today. So they reject that, they get rid of, they destroy transcendent views of right and wrong. So ethics, morality just goes away. Right and wrong ceases to exist. Nominalism is atheist moral relativism. So second last page. Atheist Darwinist subjective morality based on culture and geography has no functional difference, right? From nominalists. Sorry, this should be no functional difference. It's my bad. Okay, so atheist Darwinist moral relativism has no difference from nominalists who believe that morality is subjective and relative to culture or location. They both reject metaphysics. They both reject transcendence. There is no difference between a Darwinist atheist and a nominalist, even if he claims to be Christian, because these Christians think exactly the same way. Functionally, it is identical. So morality has no objective or universal basis and is seen sovereignty. Yes, yes, absolute sovereignty. Thank you, Oratex. Yeah, God's sovereignty. That is why Calvin and his ilk always speak of God's sovereignty. Thank you very much for, yeah. So understand that idea of sovereignty. That's why he focuses. That's why Calvin focuses on this, because Calvin has this nonsense in his head. That's why he focuses on that. So morality has no objective basis, right? It's a human construct. Nominalists, okay, believe morality is subjective and it varies between cultures and people, right? So nominalists and those who hold atheistic or Darwinistic views share the belief that morality lacks authority and objectivity, right? It's what I do is moral because that's moral for me, right? So nominalism leads to moral relativism. Anything goes, and morality is based on preference, personal desire, social conventions, right? The group think. Understand? Now you've got your communism, you've got all of these crazy ideas, and this is coming out of this idea of nominalism. So now we believe that morality, as Christians, we believe that morality goes beyond personal taste and is grounded in objective moral truths that exist within morality, rooted in the nature of God, the inner voice of the Spirit. Yes. So nominalism and moral relativism, being the same thing effectively, undermine justice, ethics, and civil society. So nominalism, like atheism and Darwinism, lacks a coherent basis for a moral system needed in a free society. Question: is torturing babies not universally bad? According to nominalists, if we follow nominalist philosophy logically, then no, it's not universally bad. It's okay. It's fine. It's just okay. It's just, you might have a distaste for it, but it's okay. It's, do you understand the problem that this poses from a cultural perspective? It is a serious problem. And final slide. So I think we've come to the end. I think this is the final slide. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what have you taken away from this so far, and does it make sense? Does my analysis make sense in terms of how this applies in the world, right? How it undermines and corrodes science, logic, religion, theology, the church, ethics, morality, families, society, government, law. It corrodes everything. So now, there's the Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. He was a very famous Muslim scholar from the 13th century, right? One of his notable contributions to the world was he had a dissenting stance against various philosophical concepts, such as logic and metaphysics. Now, of course, you wouldn't be surprised that one of the most famous Muslims of all time, effectively like one of the church fathers of Islam, stood against logic and metaphysics. He was a nominalist, right? So this is one of the most influential members in the Islamic pantheon of saints, or whatever well, not a saint, but one of the most influential Islamic fathers, shall we say. And he's the godfather of jihad in Islam. So he was associated with nominalism, right? So by critiquing the philosopher's logic and debunking metaphysical doctrines, Ibn Taymiyyah showed he was a nominalist. But that's weird because even Allah is metaphysical, supposedly. right? So his synthesis of Allah's essence and this extension of Allah immaterially into Islamic theology, also he had an alignment with a nominalist perspective. Okay, so he defended and championed nominalism through critical evaluations of of logic and metaphysics. Right. So let me skip a little bit of this. Okay, so fine, we've got Ibn Taymiyyah done. So Buddhist schools of thought of Mahayana, beginning in the first century, we think, also defended nominalism. So even Buddhists have this whole concept of nominalism. Right? Al-Ghazali, this is the most famous Islamic scholar after Muhammad himself. Right? He's known as the Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam. His argument is the proof of the truth and the fundamental superiority of Islam. He's an 11th century Islamic scholar and philosopher, right? And he's been associated with nominalism as well. So in his work, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, he advanced a nominalist interpretation of modality. So he rejected certain proofs and he approached the issue of causality from a nominalist perspective, right? So now you've got two of the most famous, two of the most influential, and don't forget, Ibn Taymiyyah is the godfather of jihad. He's the guy that wrote the book on jihad in Islam. These two are nominalists. All right. So yes, now you've got this just as a final. So that's the final item there, but the final bullet point. But you've got this nominalism also embedded in Islam. Of course, it'll have its own characteristics. It'll have its own flavor. They would have mixed it and modified it to suit themselves. But this is what happens. Error just multiplies and everyone subjectively alters it to suit themselves. There is no consistency. So that ends this. So we've finished now the last 18 slides that I missed previously. So that ends my talk on nominalism. I hope that was educational. I hope it was eye-opening. I hope it gave you perspective. Any last questions, and perhaps you can let me know what you took away from this. And I have to say some YouTube things like, please, if you like this, like it. If you, share it, like, subscribe, all of those things. Remember to brush your teeth at least twice a day, right? Floss after meals. And remember to change your oil every 10,000 kilometers or every 6 months. And check your tires and also check your tire pressure. I've got to say things like that on YouTube. So yeah, guys, that ends that. And let me bring up something else I'm busy working on. Okay, yeah, let me close that for a moment. Let me go here. So thank you, Tom Yokai. Kicked out Marlon Brando. Right. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, so this is my current talk that I'm busy working on. I've also got the Martin Luther stuff in progress. But that's nearly done. To the pictographic Hebrew. Oh, I have no idea how the context would be meant, Steve Henry. I have no idea. Okay, so yeah, I'm busy working extensively on Gnosticism. Yes, this might be familiar to some of you. So again, we're gonna have to go into woke, into trance, and Gnosticism because the two are kind of connected, as we've all discovered. So I've got a lot of stuff that I'm busy working on in terms of Gnosticism. We're going to be going into a lot of that stuff. Right, we have to look into a lot of this, and yeah. So I've got a lot of material in terms of dates. Like the Gnostics like to claim they're the original Christians, but of course, the Gnostics they really sort of start out here. The material all dates roughly to this period, so no. But they'll be happy to lie to you about all of this stuff, and I'll be going in depth through with dates, times, places, claims. So all of the Christian claims, all of the Christian happenings are here, and the Gnostics come much, much later. Wow, thank you very much for the donation. Thank you very much, Dr. Obvious, much appreciated. Yep, so I'll be working on this. So guys, the next series, I need to finish Pius X. I need to finish that particular talk on modernism. This was part of that, right? This supported that talk on modernism. I then need to go through modernism from Pius X's perspective in terms of Enlightenment philosophy. So that's the next thing we have to look at, applying Pius X's work on modernism to Enlightenment philosophy, and look at how incoherent that nonsense is. So what? Anyway, so yeah. So would you guys like Martin Luther next? Are we going to do Dr. Martin Luther? Okay. Are we going to Martinus Lutherus or Martinus Luther? Are we going to do that next? Is that something? Drop a 1 in the chat. Otherwise, I can do Gnosticism next because I have already so far done. I've done 115 slides. This is going to be about 300 slides. So if you'd like Martin Luther, drop a 1. If you would like this one, Gnosticism and Early Christianity drop at 2. Oh, wow. Steve Henry, thank you very much. Steve, rephrase the question. Okay, so drop it in the chat afterwards. Rephrase the question. Try to phrase it as well as you can. Your idea, just describe your idea, and I'll look into it and I'll answer you. Okay, but thank you again very much, Steve, for that. I'm very grateful. So yeah, so guys, drop a 1, drop a 2, so 1 for Martin Luther, 2 for Gnosticism, I think I said. Let me know which you'd like me to do. But normally I'll do 2 of these in parallel anyway. Do we need Gnosticism before Lutheranism? Look, I've been promising Luther for about 3 years. It's taken me that long to get Luther done. It's taken me 3 years, yeah, to get Luther done, because so I can do both. I mean, I can do one, and because I'll probably do 2 days a week at least, maybe 3 as I have time. I'm trying to do 3 days a week, but it depends on my time. But I'll probably do 2 days, so I can do both. I'll start with Luther then. I did promise that, and then I'll do this as well. Okay, there's interest. But you need to understand Gnosticism. It is everywhere. It is a parasite. So Luther, I think I need to do Luther and annoy everybody. And yeah, so I need to finish the talk on St. Pius, and then I need to start developing the other talk. I have the notes I need to edit. I mean, it takes a long time. I mean, trust me, to do this, 100 and something slides was not. This is days and days and days of work and research, and so this is a ton of work. So yeah, guys, let's call it a night, but thank you very much for your time, your attention. Thank you for the support, and so Gnosticism is everywhere. Vocal, yeah, it is the first enemy of the church. It has been the most persistent enemy of the church, and it has changed. It's a chameleon. It's a parasite. It changes shape. Yeah, so guys, Luther. We have to talk about Martin Luther. The man was incredibly influential. People deny it these days. They try to make up a story, but just like Muslims have been changing their story, because Islam, the internet is exposing Islam. So more depressing thoughts for me to ponder. But yeah, hopefully we can see truth. Hopefully we can see our way to facts, right? There's an old saying I used to know that, that people don't want the truth. They want a compelling lie, or they want a comforting lie, right? They want to, but that's not what I want. I want the facts, and right? And this is one saying that I've had also: when the truth is replaced by silence, the silence is a lie. I am not going to be silent. These are the facts as I can prove them. This is what I can demonstrate with overwhelming evidence. So guys, remember, be a grain of sand. You don't have to be a tidal wave. Just be a grain of sand. Grind the gears. Few of you, and you will grind those gears to a halt. So guys, thank you very much. And I will see you guys in a couple of nights. It's going to be probably Thursday will be the next chance I'll have. And take care, everyone. Good night and God bless.